Okay, well, thank you, Rob, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to me talk. So as Rob said, I'm going to be talking about Regulation 397.11 and specifically about the energy planning requirement that all public agencies are required to do, as Rob mentioned, by July 1st of next year. So just a quick outline of what we're going to be talking about today. So first I'm just going to touch on the regulatory context for energy planning. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about why we should be doing energy planning beyond the obvious, and that it's a requirement of the Government of Ontario now. I'm going to talk a little bit about developing an energy plan and some of the processes and that should go into an energy planning exercise. And then I'm just going to give a few tips for success based on my experience. So first I'm going to touch very briefly on the regulatory context. Rob went over that a little bit. So as I'm sure you're all aware, and Rob just said, so there's two main aspects of Regulation 397 of the Green Energy Act. One is to report on your energy use, and the other part is to prepare energy plans. So I'm going to focus today, as I said, on the energy planning part, but I just want to go quickly over the reporting requirements. Hopefully, if you have to report, you're aware of these because they have to be in by Monday. So basically what you need to do by Monday is that every year you have to report on your energy use and your greenhouse gas emissions. So these have to be, as I said, submitted to the ministry, and they also have to be made publicly available online and in print. And for this year, you're reporting on your 2011 data. So you're providing your 2011 energy use data to the ministries by Monday of next week. I did see that there was a question there, actually, just about the Ministry of Energy template and about posting it online. And I know we're going to leave questions to the end, but maybe while I'm here, I could just address that. So just to let everyone know that I believe that it's, Bob, you had a question that the MOE template is very large and hard to post on our internet, and what are we suggesting? And that's very true. For those of you who don't know, the ministry template is a large Excel spreadsheet that has many different columns, and it can be quite long because you have to report by building and by operation type. So one of the things I would suggest for posting it online would be you could create a PDF of the template, and then those that are wishing to look at it could just zoom in to the parts that they would want to look at. It's going to look very messy and not easy to read once you put it into the PDF. One of the things that we did is actually a lot of the columns aren't used by different organizations because they're asking you to report on wood use or fuel oil or propane and district energy, which not many organizations have. So one option would be to hide those columns, and that would make it more compact. You're not going to be able to hide those columns in the actual template that you submit. You would have to copy it into a new spreadsheet, and you will be able to hide them from there. So there's just a few suggestions for that while we were there. So now turning to the reporting requirements, the planning requirements. So whereas the reporting requirements are very prescriptive, so as I said, that there's this template that you have to complete and fill in, the planning side is not like that at all. There's very few requirements that you have to meet. So we're just going to go quickly through at a high level what some of these requirements are. So basically what you have to do is prepare a 5-year Energy Conservation and Demand Management, or CDM plan. Now this plan does not have to be submitted to the ministry like the template. It just has to be made available publicly, again on your internet, any intranet that you have, and in hard copy form. This is going to be a lot easier to print and post. the plan has to address all types of energy used in the facility. So again, like the reporting template has to cover all of the different energy types that you have. It doesn't include everything. It doesn't include certain operation types, and it doesn't include your fleet. Just because you're not required to include them, it doesn't mean that you can't. It's just not a requirement. And your plan has to be approved by senior management. So what are the timelines like for the planning? So as Rob mentioned, your energy plan has to be posted and made available by July 1st of next year. And the first planning period covers from July 1st, 2014 to July 1st, 2019, so over a 5-year period. So the and I'll get into this a little bit later. So that's the sort of the planning horizon. There's nothing to stop you from starting your plan earlier and ending it later. As long as you include that period and you have a 5-year forward-looking plan, then that will meet the ministry's requirements. For example, Rob mentioned that we did a plan for the University of Western Ontario. So one of the things that we did is they wanted a 10-year plan because that's what they do for their other planning activities. They prepare 10-year plans. So theirs went from January 2013 to January 2023. We just made sure that that 5-year period is covered, and as I say, that meets the requirements. One thing that is required is that you have to update the plan every 5 years. So in 5 years, even though their plan is still going, they will have to prepare a small update to say that this is what's going to be happening going forward. Also, at the end of the 5-year period, you have to report on your results of your plan, and I'll go into a little bit more detail later on about what that involves. So, as Rob mentioned, Indico was involved in preparing a guide for the ministry, which goes through some of the plan requirements. So just again, just to give you an idea about what the plan does have to include in it, the plan has to include your annual energy consumption, and then this has to be for the last full year for which data is available. So if you're preparing your plan in 2013, the annual energy consumption that you have to include in your plan will be for 2012. So one of the issues with this is that you're providing right now, you've just submitted or you're about to submit your 2011 energy data. Your 2012 data is not due until July 1st, 2014, but you have to include the 2012 data within your plan, which is due at the same time. So you are actually going to prepare your 2012 data a little bit in advance in order to include it in your plan before the submission date or the uploading date. Also within your plan, you have to include some goals and objectives of the plan. And one of the questions that I get quite often about this is, are organizations going to be held to the goals and objectives that are laid out in their plan? So, for example, if you say you're going to reduce energy consumption by 50% by 2019, are you going to be held to that? And because the plans aren't submitted to the ministry, they just have to be posted, I would say that the ministry is not going to hold you to those requirements. However, you do have to make your plans public, so there is the potential for someone to take a look at your plan, take a look at the results that you report at the end, and to show that they don't match up. There's certainly not a requirement to match to meet the objectives and goals that you put in the plan, but there is the potential that someone's going to look at it, however remote that may be. So also within your plan, you have to include, you have the option of including past and current energy CDM measures. So one of the things the ministry wanted to do was give people the opportunity to show what they've done to date. There was a concern from some folks that by just putting forward-looking stuff, they weren't getting credit for all of the great things they had done in the past. So you have the opportunity of putting in what you've already done, as well as what you are going to do over the next 5 years. So that's the next part, is that you have to put in what measures you propose, and you have to say what the lifespan of those measures are, the cost, and then the savings estimate associated with them. One of the other requirements of the plan is that you have to include all existing or planned renewables or alternative energies, and how much energy they are generating. So, yeah, as I said, that Indico worked with the Ministry of Energy to prepare materials to assist public agencies with their energy planning and reporting. So the materials that we prepared on the reporting side, so the reporting guide, the webinars, and the videos have already been used, and I'm sure that some of you have already seen those. But we also prepared a planning guide. So this guide is not available yet, but last time I spoke to the ministry a few weeks ago, and said they were hoping to get it up sometime in the summer. So, you know, this webinar will hopefully give you a little bit of a preview about what is in that guide. So just as a note, since the planning requirements are not very prescriptive, that the guide that we prepared for the ministry, again, is not like the reporting guide in which it provides step-by-step instructions on how to complete your template. There are a myriad of ways to develop an energy plan. As I'll go into later, you really need to develop a plan which best meets your need. So the planning guide in this presentation is just meant to give you some ideas and make sure that you meet all the requirements and give you some ideas about how you can develop the best plan for your organization. So what the planning guide does includes some, you know, some steps on how to meet the CDA plan requirements, so basically what the requirements are, make sure that you're meeting them. It provides an explanation on how to develop goals and objectives. It provides some advice on developing energy saving measures, including behavioral, organizational, and technical measures. It provides direction on how to report on renewable energy. There is some specific things that the ministry wants around renewable energy. It has some advice on how to implement the plan, including where to get resources, particularly funding. It talks about monitoring and evaluating the plan, the best ways to do that, and make sure that you're doing that. And has some advice on plan administration, who needs to approve the plan, and where you have to submit it, those sorts of things, or where you have to post it. Just to sort of circle back on the sort of reporting versus planning discussion. So as I mentioned, the energy use data has to be part of your plan, and the intent of the ministry is that really that these annual reports feed into the planning process and are one way of evaluating and keeping track of how you're doing, as these plans have to be submitted every year. And as I say, the biggest issue that I noted is that the reporting and the planning, the data that you have to include don't quite match up exactly. So you're going to have to do a little bit of work just to make sure that you have the right years of data to accompany your plan. So I'm just going to talk a little bit more about why do energy planning. So the first and most obvious reason is that it's a regulatory requirement. Public agencies are now required to prepare these plans. So some of the other benefits of conducting, and I would say more importantly of implementing these plans, because these benefits really only tend to realize themselves once the plan is implemented, or is that there's going to be cost savings. You know, you implement energy saving measures, you save energy, there's the potential to save money. You know, you're also increasing the comfort of your occupants within your buildings. Generally, you know, implementing energy saving measures improves, you know, the HVAC and heating and cooling, so and improves lighting levels. So you know, there's a real opportunity to improve the quality of the working conditions for your staff. Because energy use produces GHGs and other emissions. There's the opportunity to reduce your environmental impact. There's also the opportunity to engage staff in energy and other sustainability related issues, and there's a real opportunity to improve public relations. As I mentioned many times, these plans have to be made public, and so I think the intent is there that there's some accountability on how you're managing your energy. So there's a real opportunity to be seen as a leader and to improve, you know, your visibility and as a leader in energy within the community. So beyond compliance, and I'm certain that all of these benefits will ring true to you if you prepare an energy plan that sort of goes beyond just complying with the short list of requirements in the regulation. Ultimately, as I said, in order for these benefits to be realized, you have to have a plan that's implementable and implemented, and it's not going to do any good if it's just sitting on the shelf. You really want to prepare a plan that addresses the unique needs of your facilities, your buildings, and that is useful to you. I'd also suggest, consider including other resources beyond just energy. There's a real opportunity to develop energy and water plans, for example, as those work nicely hand in hand, or go more broad and look at general sustainability and waste within the same plan. One thing that municipalities are doing is going beyond just doing corporate energy planning, because the Regulation 397 is very much just focused on the corporation of the city, so the cities or towns or hospitals, their buildings, and not the community as a whole. One thing municipalities are doing is combining the corporate energy plan that they have to do with the community energy planning, and develop community energy plans that also are compliant with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Partners for Climate Protection program. So they're doing both of those activities in one. There is also the opportunity, and the ministry has made it clear, I double checked with them, that they are welcome for, public agencies are welcome to work together to submit plans. So I'm aware of some hospitals, for example, that are thinking of working together with their LIN. So all of them within the LIN are thinking of working together to prepare joint plans, and that's something that the ministry is happy for them to do. So if there's a situation like that, they're more than happy for that to happen. And the other thing for going beyond compliance, I would say, so plan ahead. As I mentioned off the top, as long as you include the period 2014 to 2019, you don't have to wait until July to have a plan that starts July 1st, 2014. Have a year if you can start it earlier. If you start accruing energy savings earlier, then all the better. There's no need to wait. As long as it includes that period, you're good to go. So now I just want to talk quickly about some suggested strategies for preparing the energy or CDM plans. So what energy plans address? One of the things I'd like to stress is that when it comes to preparing energy plan is that I think it's important to realize that they shouldn't just include technical measures. So for example, replacing one light bulb or pump, or variable frequency drive with a more efficient one. Obviously these are important, but I think for additional energy savings to be achieved and for the true potential of these technical measures to be achieved, you have to look at the organizational and behavioral measures that support them, and not to forget about those. And I'll talk about this a little bit more detail later on. I also just want to touch on the role of audits. So obviously conducting energy audits is extremely helpful in identifying the technical measures within your buildings and facilities. However, I'd like to state that they're not necessarily the be-all and end-all. I've seen some RFPs where public agencies are just asking for audits as the only way to complete their energy plan. And those alone are not going to meet the ministry's requirements, and in my opinion are not going to produce an appropriately robust or implementable plan. Similarly, I'm finding that some public agencies are thinking that they have to do audits of all of their buildings in order to meet either the reporting or the planning requirements, and that's certainly not the case. One of the things that we put in the guide is that, obviously it costs a lot of money to do energy audits on all of your buildings, particularly if you have a lot of them. So it may be best to focus on certain buildings of certain archetypes. So for example, if you're a municipality and you have multiple arenas, then if you audit one arena, then you can extrapolate the types of measures into the other arenas. Or you might want to focus on those buildings that have the greatest energy saving potential, which are most likely your oldest or your largest buildings. So you may want to focus on conducting audits of those first, and then you can build audits into your plan for future years. We've actually completed plans where no audits have been conducted up front, and actually the audits were built into the plan. So the structure and the format for taking advantage of the audits were built in there, so that once the audits were completed, those measures can be implemented. So either no audits can be completed before the plan, or some of them can be done as part of the planning process, and then the remaining audits built into future plan, into the plan for the future. It is important to remember that utility funding is available for conducting the audits from gas and the electricity utility, so you can get up to 50% of the cost of completing the audits, which is great. And I would suggest that that you contact your local utilities to find out exactly what's available. So who should be involved in planning? So it's extremely important to have a broad base of support in energy planning if you want to get the plan implemented. You certainly need to have senior management buy-in for many reasons, including that they actually have to sign off on the plan. Facility staff, it's also really important that they need to be on board, as they're going to be the ones that are implementing the plan on it, day to day, and are going to be a great source of information in preparing the plan. You also want to get support and buy-in from the finance staff, as it's going to cost money to develop the plan and to implement it. And you also need to have a champion, so someone who's going to take responsibility for developing and implementing the plan. There may be other stakeholders that are relevant for you in your organization, depending on the type of organization you have. For example, for municipalities, it may be important to have the buy-in of council or certain local committees that you may have, like sustainability committees. For other public agencies, it may be important to have the buy-in of the board, for example. So I'm just going to run very quickly through the planning process that we use in developing energy plans. So I'll go into more detail about each of these steps in subsequent slides. But basically the planning process that we go through is that first we define the preferred state. So what do you want energy management to look like within your organization? Next we define the present state. So what does energy management look like now? And then we develop actions to achieve the preferred state, so that bridge the gap between where you are now and where you want to be. So I said the preferred state is where do you want to be. one of the reasons, and sometimes folks find this odd, is that we start with the preferred state, is that we find if you start with the present state, sometimes you can get bogged down by the way things are, and it's hard to get out of that mindset, well, this is the way things are right now. So by starting with the preferred state, it allows you to not get bogged down about the way things currently work, and to think about the future. So within the preferred state, this is where we start thinking about, well, what are your high-level objectives and specific targets that you want to achieve? Obviously, this is backed up by what is achievable in the preferred state, but you have to think about, okay, where really would you like to be? So the present state, as I mentioned, is where you are now. So when you look at the present state, you're looking at, how much energy am I using? What is your baseline in terms of quantitative? What are your costs? How much energy are you using? But also qualitatively, what policies and programs do you already have in place? And what is your foundation for moving forward? So then you develop your actions. So you develop, as I said, you develop your actions to go from where you are now to where you want to be. And when we're developing energy plans, we tend to group our actions into six types of actions. So you have organizational, existing buildings, new buildings, monitoring and tracking, education and communication, and renewable. So as you can see, these cover a broad range of different types of actions and don't just focus on the technical actions. So you have organizational actions, which are things like the processes for obtaining resources such as funding or human resources, the processes for approving projects that you want to implement. So it's really getting all of the organizational stuff in place in order to move your plan forward. Existing buildings, these include actions that, so the technical actions that you would more typically associate with energy planning in your existing building stock. So replacing different measures and doing recommissioning, things like that. We also look at developing actions related to new buildings. So what measures, so particularly guidelines and standards, are there associated with new buildings? Monitoring and tracking, so these are measures related to how you're going to monitor and track your progress, the actions that you're implementing, the energy that you're saving, developing the key performance indicators that you want to track. Education and communication, so those are actions related to developing education or engagement programs, developing training for staff, those sorts of things, and then renewables. So these are actions specifically related to renewable and alternative energies to meet the requirements of the regulation. So once all of the actions have been developed and the actions are prioritized based on their ease of implementation and their importance, and then we develop timelines for implementing the actions. So which ones should be implemented within for example, within the first 6 months to a year, which ones should be implemented in the medium term, within 2 to 3 years, and which ones should be implemented towards the end of the plan. So as well as developing timelines, we also assign responsibility for actions. Things are more likely to get implemented, again, if somebody is responsible for their implementation. So as I mentioned earlier, at the end of each 5-year planning period, public agencies are required to report on the results of their plan, so how they did versus their targets and projections. So it's extremely important that you're monitoring and tracking everything that's taking place, and that you're aware of how you're going to track everything up front. So that, if you're putting measures in place, before it's implemented, how are you going to track what energy savings are going to be achieved associated with that. So some of the actions that you need to take with regards to monitoring and tracking is, as I say, you really want to track the implementation of your actions. You need to know what you've implemented to date. You want to develop procedures for updating your plan and reporting on your results. You have to report after 5 years, so you have to have a plan in place for how you're going to do that. You want to evaluate the impacts of your actions, so what kind of savings did they achieve. You also want to be thinking about how you want to be communicating your successes both internally and externally. And often utility incentives require demonstration of savings, so you really need to prove that you're saving energy if utilities are providing you funding to implement your measures. And obviously monitoring and tracking in and of itself can help you save energy. It's not just a tool, it's also an energy saving device in itself. So just a quick note about energy plan scalability. So obviously it sounds like it's a lot of stuff to go into a plan, but just because a plan is comprehensive and goes beyond compliance, so beyond just meeting the few requirements of the Green Energy Act, it doesn't mean that it has to be expensive. Your plan really should be scaled to fit your needs and your budget, and it's certainly possible to do that. So now I just want to provide just a few suggestions, tips for success based on my experience in having developed a number of energy plans, some of which were done to meet the requirements of Regulation 397. And I think ultimately what you want to develop is a plan that works for you and is implementable. As I said, it's not going to be useful to you if it sits on your shelf. So when developing a plan, we always try to make sure that the plan is in a format and a structure that makes sense to the client. So if you're working with someone, get a plan that works for you, not the person that you've hired. I think the worst thing that would happen is if these plans are developed sort of just to check off the box that you've met the requirement and that they're not actually implemented. I'd also suggest integrating the plan with your core activities. So most public agencies have a lot of different types of plans, whether it's official plans, sustainability plans. Planning process is not unique to public agencies. This planning process certainly isn't. So make sure that you connect this planning process with the other ones you're doing. So for example, I mentioned off the top that that University of Western Ontario developed a 10-year plan, and one of the reasons for that is that they do 10-year master plans for most of their major activities. So they wanted to prepare a 10-year master plan for energy because they wanted it to be consistent with every other plan that they have. And I think it's important to do that because there's more chance that it's going to get implemented. I would also make sure that you connect the plan to day-to-day activities and decisions. You want the plan sort of to be implemented as part of day-to-day activities. You don't want people to have to go out of their way to implement the plan. Energy management just should be part of the routine daily tasks. I talked a little bit earlier about staff resources, and again, I just stressed the importance of having a champion, so someone who's going to lead development and implementation of the plan. Obviously, this champion needs to have support and buy-in from a broad range of people in order to get it done. But the champion also needs commitment from senior management, not only because they have to approve it, but so that they're given the permission and the resources to really push the plan forward. And I'd also like to stress, the importance of putting people first. And I think this comes back to what I was saying about not just technological measures, but also having behavioral and organizational measures in place. Technological changes are implemented by people. If the people aren't there and aren't doing what they're supposed to, or engaged, or aren't buying in, then the technological measures either aren't going to get implemented or aren't going to get operated correctly. And having engaged staff that buy in is only going to help get the plan implemented and moved forward. So I also just wanted to touch finally on funding. There isn't a lot of funding out there to actually pay for the development of these corporate energy plans. There is, however, quite a bit of money available for implementation. So as I said, that there's money available from the electric and gas utilities for conducting audits. Also as part of their Save on Energy programs on the electric side. There's programs available there for actually implementing technological measures, and same on the natural gas side. They have very extensive programs that will help you pay for offer incentives for implementing energy saving measures. There's also the OPA FIT program for renewables. There has been some changes to the OPA FIT program in the last little while that I'm sure you've heard about. So one of the changes is that the FIT program is giving more responsibility to municipalities to come up with their own and submit proposals about their own renewable energy projects. So there could be an opportunity to build those projects into the planning process and get approval from those. There is the opportunity of using ESCOs, so energy service companies. As I'm sure you're all aware, they front the upfront capital costs and then you pay them back based on the savings. So some organizations really enjoy the ESCOs model, some not as much, but it's certainly an option that's available. And as I mentioned, for municipalities, there is the opportunity to receive funding from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, both for planning and for implementation. However, you would have to be tying this planning process to the community energy planning process that they run, so the Partners for Climate Protection. So if you lump it together with that program, there is the opportunity to receive funding for preparing the plan to some extent and for implementation. And I'd also encourage you to explore some creative funding opportunities and partnerships. I know some municipalities are working with their with their LDCs to develop the plan. So some LDCs are actually helping to fund the development of corporate energy plans, and look at other ways of fundraising or partnerships, or using foundations if you have them to help raise money to help prepare the plans. And that was all I had to say, so if anyone has any questions, I will be more than happy to answer them.
Okay, thanks, Shona. Can you see the questions in front of you? I think I see one or two there.
I addressed the one from Bob about the template. Hopefully that covered everything. And then there's one from Richard Miller, which says, will we have to develop a plan for each facility or just certain ones we are interested in? So it's a good question. So the intent is that you're sort of preparing a plan for your corporations. So your plan should cover your organization as a whole. and I'm not sure when you say each facility if you're referring to a building or to if you have multiple sites. But in any event, it should cover all of your facilities, all of your sites, and be as comprehensive as possible. As I said, when it comes to sort of detailed auditing of buildings, there's no requirement to do any auditing, and I would recommend that you look at, which, if you want to do auditing, that you look at which buildings it would be most appropriate to do that in. So your biggest buildings, your greatest energy consumers, or one building that you have multiple types of. So you can audit those, look in more detail at those, come up with detailed measures for those, and then you can extrapolate those to other buildings, while at the same time putting the organizational and behavioral and all the other measures that you need to support that in place for the whole organization.
And there's one more that if you could address from Anna, that just came in.
Okay. Yeah. So as I mentioned, that the planning guide, when I spoke to the ministry a few weeks ago, they were hoping to get the planning guide up sometime this summer. They haven't come up with a definite plan on when they are going to submit it, make it public. I think the intent was to wait until the reporting was out of the way and then put the planning guide up. But I can, I can certainly let folks know if I find out any more information.
Thanks, Shona. I'll just take a minute right now to ask the group that's with us if there's any last questions. We did see during the presentation that a few people had to put their hands up. So if any of those hands up in the air, there were some specific questions, please take a moment now to type them in, and we can address them. And while we're waiting on that, Shona, I'm going to ask this one, and if you addressed this already in the presentation, I apologize, but what's your opinion on the leniency on the dates and any kind of repercussions that we might face, given that there are some short time frames and to get these plans in next year? Do you anticipate seeing any extensions or leniency?
I don't think there will be any extensions. Again, because they're not submitted, I don't think the ministry is, there's over 700 public agencies in Ontario. The ministry is not going to be able to go around and check whether everyone's done it. So I don't think there's going to be an extension, and I don't think there's going to be any repercussions if it's not posted on time. If folks are really concerned about it, there's certainly the opportunity to develop a plan that meets the needs of the requirements, something very high level, and then work away on developing something more useful and detailed while that's sitting up posted somewhere meeting the requirements.
Okay, thanks. Well, it looks like we've got all the questions in, and just to be respectful of time, I'll bring this to a conclusion. So I'd like to take this moment to thank Shona for joining us. I found it quite informative, and clearly it's very topical right now. So thank you for taking the time to share your expertise. I know you're the best in the business when it comes to this area, and how many companies within the MUSH sector you've supported with very comprehensive and successful energy management plans. So thank you again, Shona.
Thank you.
And thanks to everyone for joining us. As I mentioned, you've got our contact information, so if there are any other questions that come up after this, please feel free to reach out to either of us. We'd be happy to support you through your journey here and these 39711 requirements, as we're doing with many of our clients, and I know Shona's in with many others as well. So please feel free to reach out to us. And at that, I'll say thanks for joining us, and everyone have a very great long weekend. Thank you.